And now we're up to Daf Nun Tes Hamid Beis. The Mishnah continues in Masechet Kelim. Maisa motzi midei maisa umiyad machshava. But machshava ain't motzia lo miyad maisa v'lo miyad machshava. And this is going to be a proof for Reish Lakish with regard to lo asi dibur mavatal dibur. So we'll review that case in just a minute. The Mishnah is first establishing that if you do a maisa to change the kli and be mavatal its Torah's kli, for example, they started fixing up the kli, beautifying the kli, and now he does a maisa to be mavatal its Torah's kli. A maisa is so powerful that it's motzi midei maisa. Now, it's even though initially he did a maisa, which would make the kli royal lekabel to him, and now he does another maisa to be mavatal its Torah's kli, and the second maisa is powerful enough to disqualify the same kli as was generated by the first maisa. For example, let's say he smooths out the kli, planes the kli, and as a result, he has revealed that it's perfectly complete, doesn't need any more tikkun. And yet now, if he does a maisa to be mevatel the Torah's kli, it has the power to be mevatel the maisa of hichliko v'gila sheda mechusod umiad machshava. If, let's say, the Baal Bayis thought in his mind that this kli as is a full kli for my purposes, and it's royal lekabel tuma, and he decided that he doesn't want to improve the kli further, then the maisa is mavatal the machshava and mafkir the shem kli. However, machshava ain't a motzia. If now the Baal Bayis thinks that he wants to be mavatal the Torah's kli, that could not be mavatal the Torah's kli lo miad maisa. Certainly not in the case where he did a maisa of tikkun and yipui v'lo miad mishov, and even in a case where he had a machshava to be satisfied with the kli as is, and he generated through his machshava shem kli. Now his machshava to be mevatel the kli cannot be mevatel the kli. And now we get to Reish Lakish's kash. Bishlei miyad maisa lo mafka. I understand why his machshava cannot be mevatel the maisa. That's something that's absolutely universally accepted, pshita, without question. Dibur cannot be mevatel maisa. The Gemara is considered machshava like dibur. Ela machshava miyad topic. Why can't the koach machshava of now to be mevatel the shem kli be mevatel the original koach machshava that generated the shem kli? And therefore, Reish Lakish wants to prove conclusively from this Mishnah in Masechet Kelim Per Kaf Hey that lo asi dibur mevatel dibur. Or in other words, lo asi machshava mevatel machshava. And the yatz against Rabbi Yochanan, who says that if he's mekadesh her liachar lamed, she can be choseres ba in the middle of the lamed. So her dibur now is mevatel the dibur. Here we see the exact opposite. That lo asi machshava mevatel machshava, which means lo asi dibur mevatel dibur. Our answer: shiny machshava the tuma dechin ma'aseh dami. There's a separate power of machshava with regard to a balabayis who decides that the kli is complete as is, and that means it's royal l'kabel tumah. That's considered like a maisa, and a machshava to be mavatel l'shem kli does not have the power, the legal power to be mavatel l'shem kli that was chal through a machshava, because the machshava is like a maisa. Ukirapop. Where do we find a source that machshava is considered like a maisa? And here again, we're going to learn the laws of Tumah V'Tar. The Rami, Rav Papa Rami. Rav Papa saw a stira in two psukim. One pasuk says in Vayikra Yud Aleph, "Chiyutan Mayim," and another pasuk says, "Siv miyitain." Kiyitain, not kiyutan, but kiyitain. So in one pasuk, under the yud, there's a kubutz, and another pasuk, it's a chirik under the yud. Ukarina kiyutan. Now, what's the difference between kiyitain and kiyutan? Kiyitain is active. Kiyutan is passive. Kiyutan means that the mayim and the nesinas hamayim to be machshir lamazog in a vegetable or machal to mekabel tum and ochel is memela. It's what's called a nesina melel. That's called kiyutan. Kiyitain means that he actively submerged the yerek into the mind. Haketza. How do we reconcile these two? So our Papa answers the following: Kiyutan dimyo de kiyitain. We're going to bring together and close the gap between kiyutan and kiyitain. Ma yitain the nichole. Forget about the fact that kiyitain means he actively submerged the yerek into the water. No. It means he was satisfied and happy that the water was cleaning off this vegetable. Is af yutan, so too in the case of yutan, the nesina was a nesina melea, and it's machshir the ochel l'kabel tumah. Why? Because nichole. He's satisfied with the fact that there's mayim on top of the peiros, that the peiros are submerged in mayim. If he wouldn't be satisfied, and it would be lo nichole, and he's not happy with the nesinas mayim, then the peiros would not be mukshel l'kabel tumah. Now it comes out, according to this drasha of Rav Papa, that included in the language of kiyitain is even a nesina melea, as long as it was nichale. So we see that a situation that arises, memela, is considered as if he actively created that situation biyadayim, because he's nichale and he wants the peiros to be wet. That was his machshava. So you see clearly that a machshava, even without a maisa, is meaningful to be machshir a dover and ochel to be mekabel tumah, and it's considered like a maisa. So let's summarize two distinctions with regard to dibur b'mavatel dibur. Number one, everybody agrees, it's universally accepted that dibur could be mavatel dibur if there's no additional maisa, and that we saw that Reish Lakish was moded. Number two, we have a machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish with regard to dibur sheyesh ima maisa katan, an incomplete maisa. Rabbi Yochanan, you could be mavatel, and that's the case of Kiddushin lachal lamed, and Reish Lakish, you cannot be mavatel through dibur. Now the Gemara offers another alternative explanation of the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rav Zvid Masni Lo Shmaita Ha. He understood that the Machlokes Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish was referring to a whole different nidon. In the Mishnah later on in Daf Ayin Tes Amud Aleph. And what does it say there? V'chein he, if a woman shenosna reshus l'shlucha l'kadsha, she gave the green light to a certain shliach to be makadosh, except Kiddushin on her behalf, and then the shliach went ahead, he was makadosh her to a certain person. She then accepted Kiddushin from someone else. Which Kabbalah's Kiddushin came first? Im Shalak Kadmo, if her Kabbalah's Kiddushin came before the Kabbalah's Kiddushin of the Shliach, Kiddusha Kiddushin. Fi Im Shal Shlucha Kadmo, Ein Kiddusha Kiddushin. And now we're ready, according to Rav Zvid, for the Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Lo Kiddush Atzma. Let's talk about it slightly different scenario. She didn't go out and receive her own Kiddushin. But for Chazrava, she made a decision that she doesn't want to get married. And even though she had initially appointed a Shliach, the Nasda Rishus L'Shliach L'Kadsha, she now backs out. Mao. Rabbi Yochanan holds that she can back out of Imavatal L'Shlichus. Reish Lakish Oreina Choseres. And once again, as I said earlier, intuitively, we identify with the approach of Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, she wanted a shliach, now she decides she doesn't want the shliach. Rabbi Yochanan Choseres, Asi Dibra Vatal Dibra. Reish Lakish Oreina Choseres, Lo Asi Dibra Vatal Dibra. There's no power in her dibra to be mevata the original dibra, the mini shlichus. So it means that according to Reish Lakish, in this presentation of Rav Zvid, there's no such thing as bittul shlichus. And according to Rav Zvid, this nidon, there was no ma'aseh katan at all. It was just mini shlichus. So the machlokas here is not about whether Asi Dibur Mavatal Dibur Ma'aseh Katan, but rather Asi Dibur Mavatal Dibur. And Reish Lakish is of the opinion that he Efshel Mavatal Dibur. Esvei. Now, according to Rav Zvid, the Gemara has the kashas that we asked before, in which Rabbi Yochanan raises the objection to Reish Lakish from the Mishnah in Trumas Parag Gimel. Because Reish Lakish is of the opinion that lo asi dibur vatal dibur, and yet the Mishnah says that if the Baal Bais appoints a shliach to be mafresh truma from his payros, ubital, and then the Baal Bais was vatal shlichus. Imad shelo toram, if the bittul was achieved before the shliach got a chance to implement the shlichus bittul, he's able to vatal the shlichus v'ein trumos of shliach. We see clearly that asi dibur mavatal dibur. And the Mishalech Mivatal is Dibur of Mini Shlichus. Ki Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rava, to answer and defend Reish Lakish, Hachamay Askinon, what's the case in the Mishnah? Kigon, Shekadam Balabayis, Vitaram Eskirio. The Balabayis was Mafresh Truma from the Kri in the presence of the Shliach. He was there for Megala Das that he's being Mavatal L'Shlichus. And therefore, if he did an action of Hafrashas Truma, which indicates that he's been Mavatal L'Shlichus, Havilei Maisa. And even Reish Lakish would agree that in this case, the Maisa, which proves and demonstrates his Bittul Shlichus, is meaningful, is effective. But Dibur Bilvad, a regular Dibur, that cannot be Mavatal a Dibur of Mini Shlichus. Esvei, the Gemara asks Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, according to you, Rabbi Yochanan, that you hold that Dibur is Mavatal Dibur, the Kiddushin is Batel. What are you going to say about the Mishnah in Kalim in Perkaf Hey? Kol HaKalim Yordin Lidei Tumasam Emachshava V'yein Olim Bitum Asam Ela B'Shinui Maisa. Meaning that Maisa Motzi Midei Maisa, umidei machshava, but Maisa eino motzia lomidei machshava, lomidei Maisa, lomidei machshava. So Reish Lakish says, Bishleim, I can understand and defend Rabbi Yochanan. If machshava midei Maisa lo mafka, that is clear. Lo asidim avato Maisa. Ela miyad machshava miyatapit. But one machshava against the other, like dibur against dibur, it's all equal. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, it could be mevatel the dibur. And therefore, we don't understand how Rabbi Yochanan is going to deal with this Mishnah. Amalei, so Rabbi Yochanan responds to Reish Lakish, shiny machshava de tuma, de chimaisa dami. As we said before, if you have a maisa that's machshir a kli l'kabel tuma, it's considered like a maisa, and you cannot be mevatel with machshava. There are papa rami ksiv ki yitain v'karinen ki yutan haketzad ki yutain dumi d'chi ma yitain d'nichle af yutan nami d'nichle. Esvei Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan objects to Reish Lakish from the Mishnah Gittin that we learned earlier in Lamed Beis. Hasholech get li ishto, he sends a get with a shliach, v'giya b'shliach, and the Mishalech goes out running after the shliach. O shesholach achor shlich, he sends another shliach in order to tell the first shliach on get shenasaticha batil hu arezeh batil. The shliach does not have the power, the authority to be megarish. And we see that the dibur hasheni, the second dibur, the Baal, could be mevatel his dibur rishon. And that's against Reish Lakish, who says that ain't dibur mevatel dibur. And you cannot rescind and cancel the shlichus. Or says tufta to Reish Lakish, tufta. This is a question, an objection to Reish Lakish that we cannot answer. So it comes out that there are two lishonos in the machlokas Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. According to the first lishna, the machlokas is about a dibur sheyesh ima maisa, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, yesh koch b'dibur achal levatlo. Reish Lakish says ein dibur yachal levatlo because that first dibur was supported by a maisa, like the case of Kiddushin lachal. Everybody agrees that dibur is vatal dibur. If there's no maisa, according to the second lishna, they're arguing about a dibur she'ein ima maisa. And Rabbi Yochanan says you can be mevatel that dibur. Rabbi Reish Lakish says no, you can't be mevatel a dibur. Everybody agrees that a dibur cannot be mevatel a dibur sheyesh ima maisa. V'hilchas hakavasi de Rabbi Yochanan afilu b'kam maisa. We're going to accept the shita of Rabbi Yochanan l'halacha, even in the more extreme presentation of Rabbi Yochanan. In the case of Makadish Yishalach Zman, she could be choser ba toch shloshim yom. The afal gav the equal of meimar shiny nesinas mos liada isha the kemaisa domi. And Rabbi Yochanan agrees that ein dibur mavatal maisa, and therefore, since she accepted the Kiddushin, it's like a maisa. How could she be mavatal that maisa? Afilu hachi asi dibur mavatal dibur. We don't consider the original maisa of Nesinas Mos Liyado Isha as if it were a maisa. Why? Because it's not going to be chal until after Shloshim. Gemara asks Kasha Hilchasa. I'm going to show you that you're involved now in a contradiction in two different Piskei Halacha. Amrit, you're telling me Hilchasa Rabbi Yochanan that a dibur is about to dibur kaim alon, but we know that Hilchasa Rav Nachman in the following case, and that's going to be a steer to Rabbi Yochanan. The boilahu, they had a suffix in the yeshiva with regard to the Mishnah and Gittin that we quoted earlier. A man said they get to a woman in the hands of a shliach, and he could be mavata the shliach before the shliach delivers the get to the isha. Mao sheyachsav yigarish bo, can he take the same get? And if he decides to give it to her for gerushin a second time, here we have machlokas amaroim Rabbi Nachman Omer Chosin umegarish. It's not batal shibudo. You can use the same get a second time around. Rav Sheish Zorein Chosin umegashel. And the Gemara understands that the reason why Reb Nachman holds that he could be Megarish in this get a second time is because of Ein Dibur Mavatil Dibur, which means that Reb Nachman is advocating in favor of Reish Lakish. The Kaimel and Ilchus Kavosi Reb Nachman. Now, you just paskin like Reb Yochanan that Osi Dibur Mavatil Dibur, and yet we have a rule that we always paskin like Reb Nachman. And that's a Gemara Gittin on Daf Lamed Beis Amid Beis. How do we reconcile these two Piskei Dinim? And the Gemara answers no. You got a mistaken understanding of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman is not based on the logic of Ein, on the principle of Ein Dibur Mevatel Dibur, as if to say he cannot be Mevatel again. But rather, Rabbi Nachman holds that the Baal never intended to be Mevatel again. Nehi the Baal mitor shliach mitor get lo batl. Even though he said, "I don't want your shlichus," he wasn't Mevatel the get itself. He didn't remove. He wasn't mafkir lishma from the get. The get remains kosher. The shliach is no longer a shliach, and therefore, if he decides to give the get a second time, then the gerushin is valid and the get is kosher. Now I realize that we didn't finish the daf for today, but ein davar, it's a very heavy daf. The Gemara now is going to go on to analyze the Mishnah of Harei Mekudeshes Li Liachar Lamed, and somebody came and was Mekadesh at Toch Lamed, she's Mekudeshes to the Sheni, and the Gemara is going to present the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel regarding that Mishnah. So that's where we're going to pick it up in Mirz Hashem on Yom Chamishi. And I assume same time, same station. Okay then, have a great night. Thank you so much.